Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, we have Charles from Flickinger Glassworks. Thank you, Charles, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So tell me a little bit about your background. I was looking at your website, and your work is very impressive. So tell me, how did you get into this?
I started early on. I think even as a child, I was taken with glass. I was taken with the material, and that has held on to me. I went to the First United Methodist Church in Norwalk, Ohio, and I was just knocked out by the stained glass windows. And so early in my career, beginning in 74, that's what I did, was stained glass design and restoration work. And I worked on my own, but I also worked for large restoration houses here in New York. And I did that for a number of years before I started my own business in 1985. I will say that really the biggest influence for me has been my mentors. I was very lucky, starting in 1982, that I met and spent a lot of time with five men who had bent and done hot glass work their entire lives. And they were artists, they were preservationists, they were, had big glass factories in Mexico, they had big operations in Kew Gardens, Queens, and I learned from them. I started in a small studio, 200 square feet in Park Slope, Brooklyn, in really 1984. I shared it with a sculptor. I then moved to an 800 square foot shop in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, later in 1985, and then with a bit of success and really, what can I say, craziness, I decided I was ready for 7,000 square feet in Red Hook, Brooklyn. I was not.
I think that's typical.
Yeah. So, what you don't know may serve you sometimes. And as much as I was a glass artisan, and it was my goal to do glass work for a living. I was not a business person. However, I found out early on it was important to learn as much business as you could if you wanted to really have long-term success. My father was a successful businessman. He had an independent insurance agency, and I knew about profits and loss statements. I knew about balance sheets. I knew about cash flow. I knew what it meant to the expense of taking on an additional employee. So I learned a lot from my dad, and I do consider one of my mentors. When you walk into my shop, there's a photo gallery. It's called the Glass Benders Hall of Fame, and there are photos of all my mentors and with little bios of them. So that's sort of it in a nutshell how I got started.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, important, because I know we feel like we need to pass on the knowledge that we have, and that's one of the reasons that we do this and other educational outreach, because it is important to share this knowledge with other people. So I think that's great, and having your father and having that financial knowledge it puts you way ahead of most craftspeople. So I think that's great. I mean, it makes sense to me, because the artistry, you can't just live on that level. You have to also live in this world too.
No, you really do.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, through my career, I have a lot of, for a relatively small factory, I have a lot of very good glass equipment that I got used, and I got all of it from glass businesses that went out of business.
Right.
They didn't pay their taxes, they fell behind, whatever, and so you've got to do good business first and foremost.
Yes, very much. So you told us a little bit about how you started your business. How did you go from, stained glass as your medium to, doing this curved glass and these pieces for, restoration, but also, as standalone artwork too?
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I took a glass bending workshop at was then called the Experimental Glass Workshop down on Mulberry Street in Little Italy in Manhattan. It's now called Urban Glass. It's a big operation, not for profit, out here in Brooklyn these days. But I took a workshop with Sidney Cash. It was a 2-day workshop on glass bending, and I thought, boy, if I ever wanted to work for myself, I wouldn't be competing against a lot of other fine stained glass shops in Manhattan.
Right.
This is a little bit of a specialty. So from there, I read a little ad in a penny saver in Brooklyn that said, Morgan Glass is selling his business, and John Morgan was a 4th-generation Welsh glass bender in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. So I went and talked with him. I ended up subsequently buying half of his steel molds. I now have about 4,000 steel molds that I either inherited or purchased from my mentors when they went out of business. So we have a very good stock of molds. We have five kilns, and there are, just point of information, there's 8 of us who work in my shop full time.
Okay.
So I got started with, really my first job was with the Met and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I repaired a bent glass lampshade, and I've done a lot of preservation work early on, smaller projects that helped me develop some cash flow. So we would repair some fixtures for Museum of Modern Art when they would have a Bauhaus collection, some of the original Bauhaus fixtures. Worked for auction houses. Actually, one of the very first jobs too was for Christie's. Again, that was a lamp repair. So over the years, and it only continues to grow, people really want to repair and hold on to their old lighting fixtures, and not just private lamp owners, but also government buildings. We repaired the lights, did the bent glass at Grand Central Terminal during their big renovation in the late 80s, early 90s, and I think what we're known for is repairing the clock face at the information booth at Grand Central. So we bent those clock faces and did the hand-painted lettering and all of that stuff. So preservation has always been a big part of our business.
Yes. I just have a question. You were talking about the mold. So do you take flat glass and then heat it and mold it to it? Is that how the molds work, or is it more of a poured process?
No, our raw material is flat glass. So we have hundreds of types of glass. It's art glass that's manufactured in West Virginia or Indiana. We get glass from Canada, from Thailand, from all over the world, from France, definitely from Germany. And then depending, the art glass is used more for lighting. And the different types of clear glass, which are restoration glass, starfire, low iron glass, as well as plate glass, is used for sash window restoration work, as well as display cases for department stores. So we repair a lot of display cases for Saks and for Bergdorf and for the Polo stores.
Very, very interesting. I never until I heard you talking about the molds, I never even thought about how that would actually happen. So I learned something.
Sure, that's exactly it.
Yeah,
so we're putting a piece of flat glass on a three-dimensional steel mold in an oven, working to temperatures up to about 1,200 degrees, and the glass then shapes into the mold. Of course, it has to be properly annealed. Some of the bends are very tricky. They're elliptically shaped. You have to have optical surface quality and all this.
Right.
So we don't have. Our ovens are set up. You have a high-end technician bending one piece at a time in our large, medium, and small ovens.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. That sounds like a field trip I'd like to go on.
Well,
so you've kind of talked about the different projects you've done, but what do you offer? Like, what types of projects and services? Do you just do the glass, or do you do installation? Like, what do you do?
If someone brings a lamp to us to repair, well, typically we can do all of the renovation, restoration work that would have to happen. To some extent, we are a job shop. That means we're making parts for other people's products, such as new display cases, or we do storefront work where it's bent laminated insulated panels. We do a lot of new display cases where we're just doing the bent glass. We're doing sneeze guards for restaurants, and then we do a lot of specialty work. Right now, we're working on a lighthouse on Block Island. We've done a few lighthouses, and right now we're working on a chocolate fountain for a cruise liner. So this bent glass is mounted on a wall, and chocolate flows down it into a chocolate pool.
Oh, my goodness.
So a lot of specialty one-off. We do a lot of work for artists, one-off art projects also.
Yeah. Okay, and you talked a little bit about your work at Grand Central Station, and I believe on your website that you were involved with the restoration and was it the late 80s on the torch for the Statute of Liberty?
Yes, it was in the early 80s. And
the early 80s. Okay.
And I was not, it was for the centennial celebration of the Statue of Liberty, and I was actually working for Rambush Decorating at the time. So I was employed by a stained glass studio, and we went out on a work boat for 3 or 4 months, and we restored the original bent glass that was in the flame on the torch.
Okay, very cool, very cool. And so I'm trying to think, like, is it like mostly those kinds of projects, are they mostly like public projects than like the Grand Central, or like your most notable projects, like they're more like public buildings or public displays or monuments? Would you say that that's true?
I would say that they're the ones you're going to see because, as you stated, they're out in the public. So we'll do the lighting at the Nebraska State House. We'll do the lighting at the Ohio State legislative buildings, or the legislative buildings in Trenton, New Jersey, or at public venues like department stores. But a lot of our finer work can be in private homes, and you're never going to see it.
Right.
So we've done some incredible woven glass sculptural ceilings that are in private homes in Washington D.C. and you'll never see them. So so it's kind of both things. Things are out in the public, and things are held privately. Yeah.
Yes. The more that I hear, I was excited when I looked at your website, but the more that I hear you talk, it just sounds like you're really creating art, whether you're making something for the cruise ship or restoring a national monument. It's really, the art is all connected.
Well, it's very high-end artisanal work, and without exaggerating, I can probably say the glass technicians who work in my shop are probably the most talented in the city, and that's because we do so many. I mean, 25% of the work that comes into our shop, we don't know if it's possible to do it. When we do it, it's something that will have been done for the first time.
Right.
However, I want to be clear. I mean, I always think of art as dealing with what's sort of the unknown. Artisanal work is what's known. We are being directed for the most part, but we certainly have we have a voice when we're talking to architects, designers, artists about what they're trying to fabricate, and we tell them and show them what can really be done with glass. That sometimes we can stretch their imaginations, and sometimes we have to rein things back and tell them things that that you physically can't do with glass. So.
Right, that is impossible.
Yeah, right, and. Like one of my mentors, John Morgan, told me, he says, you think your career is going to be about fabricating glass? He says it's going to be about educating your customers. He's right.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is, and sometimes I think, being on that edge where you're kind of pushing yourself and pushing the limits and seeing what can be done, those are exciting times, but they're also like sleepless nights where you're trying to find a solution.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, we're manufacturers in New York City. There's a lot of pressure from many different parts of doing business, it. And like you say, though, truly one of them is that you are pushed and you don't know how you're going to actually complete a project. That is true.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I know that you talked a little bit about knowing that you needed to have a business background, but what do you wish that you knew when you got started that you know now?
I think that's 100 things, right? But sometimes you're not. Sometimes you don't learn those things without making mistakes, and you don't learn. There's nothing you can learn early on. I many times just watch my employees make mistakes because I say, "Boy, don't try to tell them. Just let them do it and find out." But I guess if I knew more about how to be a boss, how to be a leader. Fortunately, a little bit of that comes to me somewhat naturally. But if I could have really learned more about how to be a boss and lead a company, and there are people who teach these things, I think that's the kind of thing I would have wanted to know more about.
Yeah, I agree, because I think just because you're a good craftsperson doesn't necessarily translate into being a good manager, and I think that's right. A struggle and a struggle for a transition for a lot of people.
It is. It's very hard. It's because you've got a lot of very close relationships in my shop, and it's about mutual respect, and it's about being a professional and not taking things personally and not letting others take things personally. It's not personal. It's business. And that's always very clear.
Yeah. And sometimes, especially in a small shop, sometimes that line, starts to get stretched, and that is when there's problems.
Oh yeah, something has to be nipped in the bud right away.
Yeah, definitely. So from your niche of preservation and repair, what are the biggest challenges or trends do you see?
Well, I think that I've been willing to take on more challenges. I am Charles Flickinger. I'm the one who does the lamp repairs because it's really tricky and it's very challenging, and we get a lot of old lamps in, as I've said, to repair, and I see people wanting to restore more of the lamps. And also because of landmark laws, more people have to have things done in a respectful way when you're restoring a
Right.
building. Oh yeah, you can't just tear your windows out and put in aluminum clad flat windows anymore. You have to,
Right.
especially for buildings like, well, we did all the windows at bent glass windows at the Museum of Natural History. Well, they had to follow a protocol, of course, landmark buildings. So that has been a big change, and I think generally, and I'm sure that folks would agree to a large extent that one thing is that makers, and there's a newfound respect and recognition for people who are making a living with their hands.
I agree. Yeah.
And people want to come in. Youngsters want to come into my shop and see people making a living the old-fashioned way with your hands.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of mutual respect for other fields that we have, and no one's going to get rich or really make a lot of money doing things this way. You have to be passionate about the material. You have to be passionate about the work, and that's what has to matter.
Yeah, and I definitely see that a trend culturally happening, even like the farm to table, all of those things, just trying to get back to a more, I don't know if simple is the right word. I don't know if
I think it is.
We're going that far. Okay, yeah.
I think simple is definitely the right word. That's what I would use. We do a line of tableware, and this line of tableware, I have finally refined it so that in life you only need one bowl, and that's all my wife and I eat out of. It doesn't breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Doesn't matter what you're eating. So I used to have all sorts of tableware sets and side dishes and all this stuff I sold in my shop, and now in our showroom you get one bowl, one size. You can get it in different colors and thicknesses, but you only get one shape. So that's what it is. Here's a great quote from Admiral Richard Byrd that is on the showroom in my shop, and it says, "Half the confusion in the world comes from not knowing how little we need." Doesn't that kind of sum it up?
It does.
Yeah.
And I do think that, once you start to strip down, you do find that you don't even miss what you had.
Agreed. I agree.
Yeah. Okay. So how can our is there anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't cover?
Well, I would just say that, as I mentioned, I've been doing glasswork since 1974. I have run Flickinger Glassworks for the past 35 years. I turn 70 next month, and nobody lives forever.
Right.
And so that said, I am looking for any ideas on transitions and anyone who wants to speak about how to keep this business moving into the future without me.
Very good. I will put that out there.
Yeah, definitely, because it's a sweet, successful business, and if anyone felt like really grabbing the bull by the horns and jumping into the big leagues here in New York, it's a wonderful opportunity. If people want to reach me, my email, charles@flickingerglassworks.com. I can spell that or not. Or you can call our shop. We're, Flickinger Glassworks in Red Hook, Brooklyn, where you can find us. You can Google Flickinger Glassworks. I'll come up. My email will come up. Our phone number will come up. And as you can tell from us talking, I'm not shy. So, people can reach out and talk about anything.
Yeah, and I'll make sure that all of your contact information and a link to your website are on our site where we put the podcast up to. So if somebody listens and then wants to come back, they definitely can.
That's terrific. Thank you for that.
Thank you. And did you have any offers for our listeners? Any your tableware, anything?
Well, yes, I'm offering, if anybody wants to come down to Red Hook, we're right on the harbor. Our business is, 30 feet from the water. I would offer people the wonderful opportunity to tour Red Hook, Brooklyn, which is like nothing else in Brooklyn or New York City, to come down and see our shop and see our showroom. And we are open, 5 days a week, all day, and we're open most Saturdays. So that's my offer.
Okay, well, very good. I might, next time we are up that way, I will take you up on that offer.
I would love it. And if anyone wants a brochure, they can contact me. We have a very nice, simple brochure that we send out.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Danielle. You're doing quite a service. You're doing admirable work.
Thank you. You are too.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.